Good evening to you in business news at this hour. The second quarter Absa Purchasing Managers Index has climbed to 48.5 points, reflecting a slight improvement in South Africa's manufacturing activity. This is due to an increase in new sales orders as domestic demand rose and overseas sales rebounded moderately after reaching lows in May. However, at a level below 50 points, the PMI remains in contractionary territory for the eighth straight month, indicating that the sector is still failing to achieve sustained momentum. That's as the increase in demand did not transfer into increased production. At the same time, employment in the sector increased significantly, reaching its highest level in more than a year. Absa CIB economist Andiswa Nondudule speaks to us about this reading. Thank you so much for your time, Andiswa. What is the reading telling us about the current local economic climate?
So I think what the latest PMI is telling us is that, as much as there was some improvement in the PMI, as you pointed, it did increase to 48.5, but I think it remaining below that 50 neutral mark for the eighth straight month now is sort of worrying, and just highlights that there's still some, underlying pressures within, or challenges rather, within the manufacturing sector.
Let's talk more about those challenges and how they affect the near-term outlook then.
Yes, I think let me just go to firstly the indices that supported the increase in the PMI, one being, I think you did say, new sales orders. So that improved quite significantly during the month of June. And I think it was largely supported by domestic demand that showed some recovery there. As much as, yes, we did see export sales sort of increasing somewhat in June compared to May, but I think volume still remained quite subdued. So yeah, those challenges being that even with this demand, we're still, struggling to sort of translate it to activity. And as we saw, the manufacturing sector was one of those sectors that subtracted from GDP growth in the first quarter. So I think, the challenges within the sector remain. And I think if you look at what those challenges could be, I think one is just the low growth environment. I think in terms of electricity supply, I think that challenge is largely behind us now. Also, supply chain issues, those are also still rather largely behind us. So I think the biggest sort of hindrance on economic activity in the manufacturing sector is probably, a low growth environment.
Speaking of challenges, to what extent is it attributed that South Africa's recent and possibly still ongoing logistical challenges have had an impact too?
Definitely, they have had an impact. And I think one of the indices that it has affected is that supplier delivery times index. As you know, that when we had those periods where there was some supply, supply and chain disruptions within the economy, we did tend to see that index increasing, even though we didn't see any pickup in activity or demand. So I think some of those lingering issues of supply chain bottlenecks do still persist there. But I think it is worth noting that for June, respondents did not note any significant supply chain bottlenecks. So I think the rise in that index in June was largely due to sort of the pickup in demand that we saw during the month.
Lastly, what are the other risk factors to further gains in this regard, given that the current global economic landscape includes trade and geopolitical tensions?
Yeah, so I think the risks to the sector is obviously the trade tariffs do pose a risk to the sector. As we know, South Africa is a key player within, global trade. We do trade a lot with the rest of the world. So I think developments there do sort of affect our manufacturing sector, given that if we do see, a slowing in global growth, that means less demand for our exports. And we do, export a bit of our, the products that we manufacture domestically to the rest of the world. So I think developments within, the trade tariff space is likely to affect the sector and, the slowing in global growth.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Absa CIB economist Andiswa Nondudule discussing the latest Purchasing Managers Index.